My superpower is the ability to take things that are completely nebulous, that don't really have a form, right? And then give those things an actual form, and then teach other people how to use them. So like influence, that's what 7 Triggers CS is, right? So identifying something like influence and taking it out of the realm of woo-woo and bringing it into, no, you don't have to be born with it. There are actually 7 triggers, and I can tell you how to identify them and use them, right? So that's something very nebulous that you make very concrete.
Today here we have with us Dawnna St. Louis. I simply like to refer to her as the Queen Bee. Let's rock with Dawnna.
It's great. So high energy, had me engaged the entire time.
I think what's great about Kevin's message is that, no matter how naturally talented you are, no matter how great you can be, you can always keep striving for that next level. And even, if you become complacent, you might not even realize you've done it. But Kevin really helps you realize, that there's so much more that you can do. If you take a step back, really reevaluate what you're doing and what you're not doing, you can take it to the next level.
I loved his message about God's gift to you and your gift back. And he's just so down to earth and just a helpful, wonderful man.
Really, I think you can put him in front of anybody, and you're going to be inspired, you're going to be motivated, you're going to want to go out there, and you're going to want to start, reaching for that next level today.
Hey, thanks so much for joining in to the Leadership is Personal podcast, bringing you real-world solutions to real-world challenges in anywhere from 3 to 10-minute increments. Leadership is personal. Here's the better results.
Dawnna, how are you today?
I'm good, because you can. You know you can.
Oh, is that right? You really think you can? Awesome. Well, I hope today that when folks tune in, they will actually hear exactly how to get anybody to do anything. But as you know, you're here with me on the Leadership is Personal podcast, and this is a quick little interview where we're going to give tidbits to real world challenges, some of the most vexing challenges that our listeners face in industry. And this month is dedicated to women in industry, and you happen to be a woman. And you happen to be in industry.
Wow.
And so the first thing I'll ask you about being a woman in industry, I'm just going to jump right in. Dawnna, what's your superpower? And more importantly, how does it show up?
My superpower is the ability to take things that are completely nebulous, that don't really have a form, right? And then give those things an actual form, and then teach other people how to use them. So like influence, that's what 7 Triggers CS is, right? So identifying something like influence and taking it out of the realm of woo-woo and bringing it into, no, you don't have to be born with it. There are actually 7 triggers, and I can tell you how to identify them and use them, right? So that's something very nebulous that you make very concrete.
Well, tell me how that shows up. How have you used that in industry or in work?
Well, in my business, it's been quite instrumental in the methodologies that I develop, right? And so the methodology that I've developed for building a business, the 6 strategies, the methodology, the 7 triggers, which is specifically for influence. And it even shows up when I'm working with my clients in regards to challenges that they have. I know one of the reasons that I have the seat at the table is because I kind of have that X-ray vision into those things. And so people will ask me about that other side of the coin perspective, or that X-ray vision, or my ability to see things that other people don't necessarily see.
Okay. Now, the funny thing you said your seat at the table. Now, your having a seat at the table would give you a really interesting amount of influence and power, quite frankly. And so what I'd like to know is, have you ever sponsored someone? Maybe had someone else get an invitation to the table? And if you have, what was it about that person that made you sponsor them?
The sponsoring thing I take very seriously. It's kind of like the same way that I don't give people it's rare that I give someone a referral, because if I give someone a referral, I'm basically guaranteeing their work, right? At least that's how I feel. I take it very, very serious. So I put a lot of weight on it. So when I sponsor someone to be at the table, to kind of have those opportunities, I'm really saying, listen, I'm guaranteeing your work. So not that there's any pressure for being here for the first time, but don't embarrass me. And
is
usually
that
the
how
way
you say it, just like that? Don't embarrass me.
Don't embarrass me, for real. Don't embarrass me, because I dug the hole before we even got here, just in case. But the reason that I do generally sponsor someone is because of their actions before that sponsorship. So they probably came to me. They probably noticed something that I was able to do that maybe they wanted to learn how to do, and they asked me a question. But then beyond that, which is the part that's the most important to me, was they then took that information and they did something with it and they came back. So it wasn't like they just took the information like holla and they left. They actually turned around and said, this advice that you gave me, I did this with it and this was the outcome. Now, of course, I feel like I'm invested in their success and in their future. So, if that advice didn't work out, what am I doing? I'm like, well, let's try to figure out the better way to do it, or if that advice did work out, because I know that they're the person who took the advice and did something with it, I'm more willing to feed them from that plate again.
Okay. I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about your superpower again, just for a hot second, right? Because that superpower that you mentioned, your ability to kind of distill something complex into something more palatable, I would venture it might be an even more interesting dynamic being a woman, bringing that sort of complex talent, I might call it, or that sort of expertise, if you will, to the table. As a woman, I got to imagine it may show up a little differently than if you were a 5'10" white dude. And so talk to me a little bit about what are the idiosyncrasies around bringing that sort of power, any power that you might bring, or any insight that you might bring as a woman, as opposed to being a man?
Yeah, there are definitely nuances to using it, because one of the things that requires, especially when, there are a lot of people that have X-ray vision, and they have X-ray vision into different things, right? And as you know, Kevin, we talk on the phone a lot, and I'm always asking questions, and I always have to preface my question with, and not just with you, but with men in general, I always have to preface my question with, this is not meant to be disrespectful. I'm not saying that what you're saying isn't correct. And I always have to tell people that I'm trying to get to the other side of the coin, or I'm trying to open up a different line of thinking, or I'm trying to get people to see another perspective. Whereas I do believe, and I have seen that guys don't generally do that, right? So they can generally just use their superpower at the table and it's good to go. And whether there's collateral damage or not, it's fine. But if I do it in that exact same way, and I have, then all of a sudden I'm the bitch at the table and not the person that's trying to help at the table. And so I have noticed that I have to temper my superpower with a whole preface so that it'll be more easily consumed by others.
That's interesting, right? Because, having known you and known you as a executive coach and the like, you are certainly not one to dim your light. So how do you square that with who you are authentically and not being willing to dim your light, where some may perceive that as dimming your light a little bit so that it's not so bright that it shines into the eyes of your counterparts or your colleagues? Right.
So what I do, first of all, is I make sure that I surround myself with people who recognize what my intentions are. Because if they know what my intentions are, then they know that I'm not coming at this from a way of attempting to dishonor or disrespect for someone else. That's number one. So when people recognize that going in, then they're going, okay, Dawnna's getting ready to get in. It's kind of a joke. She's getting ready to put on the cape. She's about to ask some questions, right? And so I'm getting ready to go in, and I give people heads up. I'm getting ready to go in because I don't want them, when I jump in the pool, if they don't want to get splashed, I want them to go ahead and back up, and people can handle it, can come forward. So what I have really learned to do is surround myself by the right people. And even when I worked in business as an executive where I had all these people around me, I was still very clear about the people who I wanted around me and who I didn't. And I got to tell you, there were some times that superpower wasn't taken to be the positive thing that it was.
So how'd you deal with that?
I started my own business.
That's one way of doing it, I suppose. Now, what my listeners don't know, Dawnna, is that here's why I call Dawnna the Queen Bee. There's a few little tidbits that I probably maybe I should mention them in the intro. But the reality is Dawnna's a young woman who was at one point homeless, who actually started a business, got a degree at 40, was it? Something like that? Started a consultancy and then sold it for, we'll just call it significantly 9 figures. How about that? We're talking about 3 figures plus 6 zeros. So, you guys can do math simply by being leaders on this podcast and listening to this. I know you know what 9 figures mean. So anyone that can do that, anyone that can sort of decide later on in life, this is what I want to be, to go on and start a consultancy and sell it for 9 figures. One would hypothesize that you're a bad woman. So my question for you, and setting all that up, what that says is that you must know a few things about being a woman leader, and how to get ahead.
I worked in IT, right? So I worked in a predominantly male-dominated society where, quite honestly, everyone had a degree except for me. And this was before I started my business intelligence consultancy. So everyone had a degree except for me. And so there was a little bit of that, you're cute, pat on the head, sit at the end of the table, and make sure you take notes, kind of attitude that I had to help people get past. And it did give me a little bit more of a rougher exterior. But I also have very thick skin, right? And that's the other thing. I'm not super sensitive. So people say stuff and it doesn't, it just rolls off. It doesn't bother me. I'm pretty quick to the cut, so I know how to come back at them too, So I'm like, oh, that's the game we're playing? Cool, because I bought the bat and balls for that. Right? And so for people, by the way, who are going, well, I don't want to quit my job and I don't want to start a company, that type of thing, then, here's the challenge that you run into is that you might have to go to those people individually and you'll say, hey, listen, I know that I might be coming off a certain way, and that's not my intention. And I feel like if you always go to people and you always let people know that these are your intentions, and then you ask them how you could do it better or how would they prefer you to do it differently, and you really listen to them and ask them that, and you even give it a shot because, hey, it might work, then you've done your job in regards to make things better. And if that doesn't work, then they probably are scared of your shine and they can't handle it. You got a different problem.
Yeah, I tend to believe that my experience has been is people can take a punch as long as you let them know it's coming. Even if it's something as simple as, can I give you some feedback? Or can I tell you what I was thinking about this? Right. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's been my experience. So what should women do that aspire to get to where you sat? That aspire to be kick-ass leaders like you've been and like you are.
Right. They want to have a seat, not only a seat, but they want to have a voice at the table. They want to lean in, and they don't want to just be the people taking notes. And quite honestly, I would tell you, the first thing that I tell women, especially when they're first starting out, is number one, stop taking notes.
What do you mean by that?
Because there's always this one woman that shows up to every meeting and she has a notepad, and her full contribution is taking notes and then taking those notes and distributing them to everyone rather than being a part of the conversation, because she can't be a part of the conversation because she has to keep up with the notes, right? So she's literally silenced herself by putting a pen in her hand. So that's the one thing. But here's the other thing that I think, I know this really works, and it works extremely well. The crab in the barrel mentality among women in business has significantly changed over the years, significantly, because it used to be that if you're a woman in business and you were moving up, that you had to deal with the other, women there and had to worry about the cattiness and the conversations. And if you wanted to get away from them, quite honestly, you had to hang out with guys. I know that I did that a lot because I was not willing to deal with all of that stuff. But then there became a point where the women that I was around, they were quite different. And it was more about having a sisterhood of women that were advocates for each other. And so that is one of the bigger differences that I'll tell you today, that if you are a woman in business, you need to find that female advocate. Not that you don't have to have male ones, but kind of go out of your way to find a female one. And if you have too many female ones, by the way, go and find a male one.
Okay. Okay.
Perspective is
So
critical.
how do you know this? Was this something that was it shared with you? And really what I'm trying to get at really was, you know, we all get leadership advice, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the best piece of leadership advice? And more importantly, why was it the best piece of leadership advice? And maybe that was it. And if that was it, that's great. But tell me, what's the best piece of leadership advice you've ever gotten?
You know, I think the best piece of leadership advice, there's a couple, but one was accept people where they are. And then, you know, so that was, you know, first and foremost, right? Accept people where they are without expectations of where you think they should be. There are several times that I would come to an organization and someone had a title, and based on that title, I thought they should have been at a certain level, only to find out that, you know, titles at the organization were maybe passed out like Skittles. Okay. Right. And so, you know, so it was one of those things where I really had to sit down and get to know the person. And then it's really going beyond what that person is presenting to you and finding out what their personal wins are, because it's more than about them coming to the job and getting that check. It is really about something much deeper than that. And so I always look for the person behind the title. I want to know what personal wins you are actually looking for. Believe it or not, knowing something as simple as that changes the game in regards to how you lead people. And I'll give you a very specific example. I knew this one lady who wanted to learn Spanish. It was just, she said we had talked about it. She said she'd been trying to do it for years and she just never could do it. And I didn't understand why she couldn't do it. And she said she just never had the time, or she didn't have this or whatever. And she didn't have anyone to practice with. So I went out and bought a Rosetta Stone. And I said, if you are willing to do this, then I'll come in a half an hour earlier and we can just practice Spanish every day. Now, here's the thing. I'm not fluent, but I learned Spanish. But I learned a significant amount of Spanish. I mean, that was so many years ago. I don't even know if I can conjugate a verb anymore. But the point is that it was something that she wanted to do, and I found a way to help her. And eventually I found someone else who also wanted to learn it. And I got those two to work together, and I kind of removed myself from it. But still to this day, she just hit me the other day, and she here's the funny thing. She gets a consultancy position in Spain because she's fluent in Spanish. She just got back to the United States like a week or so ago, and she hit me up and she said, I don't think you ever know how much of an impact you really had on my career. It's because she wanted to learn how to speak Spanish. So find out about the person behind the role.
You know, I think you've just answered a question that I haven't even asked yet. Typical Dawnna fashion, huh? So what? And the question that I'm referencing is, what is leadership is personal to you? And I think the story that you just told me has everything to do with why leadership is personal. I mean, I know you've heard me say it before, that there's a 300% lift in productivity when you get to know people outside of work and take an interest in their personal lives. And so, you know, that's I think that's a phenomenal leadership is personal story. And
it doesn't have to be huge, right? So there's this big belief that it has to be like this big, ginormous thing. And that's why I say, you know, just ask people about the personal one. We're so big about sitting down and coming up with what their goals have to be by the end of the year so they can get their bonus. But we never even sit and ask them, so what's that one personal thing? Like if you're like, oh my God, this is the one thing I want to do. You know, you want to learn salsa dancing? You want to, you know, I had people who wanted to learn how to speak. So we bought in a Toastmasters club. It cost the company nothing, you know, but it made all the difference in the world to those people.
Totally get it. So it sounds to me like, you know, you were a kick-ass boss, manager, et cetera, in IT. Why'd you leave in order to move to where you are today? What's the impact that you're trying to make now? So
those are two different questions. The reason I left, the impact is completely different. So one of the things that I did very successfully, like I said, I had that business intelligence company. And what a lot of people don't know is when I retired, the one thing I decided to do was I was going to
interrupt you for 1 second. You said when I retired, y'all. She's not too far removed from that degree at the age of 40. And she just said, when I retired. Okay, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I retired. So I retired at 39, right? Right. And right before I got my degree. And I decided that I was going to go and get this, this job, just this consultancy job, right? And one of the challenges that I ran into was that I was used to being the person that made the decision. And it really irked me about the lack of, testicular fortitude and ovarian audacity of the people that the other people that were quote unquote
I'm
leaders.
I'm going to let that slide. I'm not going to stop that. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, it drove me nuts that they could not make and move on to a decision, and things move so slowly that I was just like, I can't do this. At that point, I knew I couldn't be someone's employee. It just wasn't going to work for me anymore. So I had kind of worked my way out of ever being an employee again. But now I work with people to help them identify, again, what their superpower is, what they do best, and how to turn their expertise into an entrepreneurial business.
How do you do that?
How do I do what part? Help people turn their...
Yeah. How do you help them turn their
expertise into an entrepreneurial business? Well, I run a company called I run a company called highprofitzone.com. And so it uses the 6 strategies, that blueprint that I told you about. So it uses the blueprint. We bring people in and we literally take them through the processes and the methodologies and the procedures that they need to be able to identify their expertise and their driver. Because your expertise is not just the role that you have, which a lot of people think it is. It's not. But we help people identify their expertise. We help people identify their ideal client, and we help them identify an offering and how to even price themselves and market it. So that way, by the time they leave, they have what they need in order to make money.
Gotcha. Well, we're winding down, and I think I have just a couple more questions for you. Mm-hmm. The first one that I would ask you of the last couple is, what are some strategies to help women that are in industry today, that are in industry right now? They may be leaders right now, they may not be. What are some strategies that you would advise them to engage in to level up where they are currently?
Absolutely. So there's 2. So the first one, and this is more for the more junior person, the person that's not quite at that vice president level role, so to speak. So they're, maybe they're director level and below. And I got this advice so many years ago, and I cannot tell you how it changed the trajectory of my career. And that advice was for me to actually go on 3 different interviews. Now, when I first started out in IT, it was to go on these 3 different interviews every year for a few years because IT moved so fast at the time. And the market was crazy, so it was easy to get these interviews. But here's the long and short of it. You want to go on 3 different interviews. The first interview is an interview that is completely below what you would take from a financial perspective. Even the job, like you qualify for it, but there's no way you're taking 3 steps back. The next one is the one that is directly at your level. Like right there, it's exactly what you're doing today. And the third one is the one that's over your head. The reason that you want to take on all 3 of these interviews and go for them as if you really want the job is this. The first one that is not even close to something that you would ever want to do, you're not going to take that interview. And the one thing that you need to learn how to do is say no and keep a friend, right? So you need to know how to say no to the people who are offering you the job, say no in a way that makes them feel still good about your relationship with them. And then you want to keep that relationship strong. Because if you say no and they're pissed off at you, then you do a bad job. That's number one. The second one is the one that's right at your level. So the one that's right at your level, you want to take on that one because what a lot of people do is they get in these companies, they stay in these companies, and what they don't realize is that the market has moved. And so you want to know that your number one, your skills are still marketable. And number two, you want to know that they're marketable at very least at the rate that you're making, or you want to see if there has been changes made in the market and therefore you should be getting paid more or less. If you should be getting paid less, then you really need to up your skills. You now know that. You wouldn't know that otherwise. And then the third one that's over your head is really more so than anything, it is a fact-finding mission. Your job is to go in there and find out what did it take for somebody to get in that job. You need to do all the interviewing that you can. You really want to turn the interview, turn the tables on the interviewer. What I have found though historically is I did learn how to say no. I always recognized where my skills were and how much money that I was making or was not making, or where my skills were or lacking. But then number three is I almost always got that other job, which by the way, I negotiated my butt off for the other job because I wasn't really planning on leaving my company. right? And so I'm interviewing for this job and negotiating for it like I'm going to get it. And I'm like, y'all really going to pay me that much more money? Maybe
Oh man, I think that's three very sage pieces of. I know it's one piece of advice, but it's three very sage strategies.
That's one piece of advice. So here's the other one for the people who are a little bit higher in their career. If you're a little bit higher in your career, then the one thing that you definitely want to do, like I said, is you want to have an advocate. What happens sometimes is the reason that women can't get above that glass ceiling is because their voice is not being heard. They might be sitting at the table, but they're not being heard at all. And so you want that advocate to help you not get mansplained away. So when you say something and, Bob jumps in, your advocate go, well, hold on. I want to hear what you have to say, Bob, but I'd really love to finish hearing what Dawnna had to say. And so that way you literally have a person in there that helps you raise up your voice a bit, and someone that you volley with and you help raise them up as well. You really want to have that advocate, and you really want to start making sure that you're taking what I call, movements towards the head of the table. And I mean this literally. Don't sit in the crap seats. Start sitting in the middle of the boardroom table on either sides until you are owning the head of it.
Okay. Another sage piece of advice. And so lastly, within my book, Better Results, I tell people before they get out the phone, before they get out the bed, before they grab that phone, I want them to capture what they're grateful for. Now, we're at a time of the year where we are abundantly grateful. We're in this sort of gifting mode, and we're really thankful for what's happened throughout the year. In this case, we're really happy and thankful for what happened over 2018. Well, immediately following 2018 is 2019. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to know is, at this time next year, what will you be grateful for? What will you be thankful for?
I will be thankful that my international retreat that I'm doing in Costa Rica was sold out, right? I am glad that I will be very grateful for the 157th millionaire that came from all the coaching and consulting that I've done, because we're at 152 right now, and we're on millionaire watch for the next 4 between March and September. So we know those are coming. And, I'll be very grateful for the positive impact that I've been able to make on people who wanted financial freedom from corporate colonization, right? Not everybody's meant to work for someone else, and that's fine. And so there are people who don't thrive in that environment, and I show them that they can thrive in another one. And so for those people, I'm very grateful for them.
Outstanding. Well, you've heard it right here from 3-time multi-million-dollar entrepreneur, business success blueprint creator, and Daily 6 creator, Dawnna St. Louis. Dawnna, thanks a lot for joining me today, and I'm absolutely certain that our listeners will benefit from, will value, and certainly enjoy the time that we've spent here.
Awesome.
We'll see you later.
All right.
If you join us here each and every week, you'll get a tidbit of information and insight that'll help you be the best version of yourself. Come back next week. Be sure to join us on Facebook within the Facebook group. Check us out on Twitter and on Instagram. Kevin D. Wright. Look us up. Check us out. Link to us online. Love to hear from you. Unlike some of the other podcasts, I want to hear directly from you, and I will answer your question. There's no question too tough, so together we can solve it. Stop back and tell a friend. Leadership is personal. Here's the better results.